Okay, good evening everyone, and welcome to this week's Coping with the Crisis. We're glad to have you here. Our presentation this evening is for couples and the challenges and stressors that they're facing during this time. Our presenters are Donna and Tom Ledbetter, who are practitioners at Brandywine Pastoral Counseling Institute here in Lewes, Delaware. They're also members of our congregation. We're glad to have them with us. And without further ado, Donna or Tom, take it away.
Okay, I'm beginning tonight. So here we are. Can you believe it's week 11? I've been counting. You can see we have been isolating, sheltering in place, locking down, quarantined, whatever term you find most appropriate. Here we are. And we're squeaking toward coming out, cautiously re-entering the world. And this seventh presentation that we're doing for St. Peter's, Coping with Crisis, hopefully has been helping all of us to cope, to survive, and hopefully to thrive. And, you know, when the committee met together to talk about this series and we're planning it, we all said we couldn't leave out addressing what's been happening between coupled and partnered relationships over these weeks. No doubt relationships have been put to the test, and after 11 plus weeks of living very differently, couples have a chance to do what I might call a relational inquiry. They could look back at these weeks and assess how they've been doing, what's possibly changed, and perhaps what's been discovered. Do they feel it has been a positive experience in spite of the stressors, or has it been quite negative? Have they changed and grown in some ways, or have they remained rather static? Will they make some changes to become closer and healthier? So these kinds of questions we might be able to discuss later after the presentation. I hope you'll be thinking about them. So for many couples, old unresolved issues, long-standing problems, personality styles and quirks have become exacerbated during this time of pandemic, which is typical for any of us during times of distress and crisis. Stress does not typically bring out the best in any of us. I think some couples have recognized this old stuff emerging and have tackled this with some success, but I think many have become mired down. For some, the number of stressors have become so great that they become incredibly weighted down and their relationship has truly suffered. Some couples have become abusive to each other and to family members, and I was really sorry to hear that there's been about a 25% rise in domestic violence during this pandemic, and unfortunately a rise in child abuse as well as substance abuse and other forms of acting out. It doesn't surprise me, but it is sad. Professional help can be useful to any couple at any time, whether they're experiencing serious issues or not, but it is of utmost importance if violent language, behavior, and addictions have become seriously problematic. If you're here with us tonight watching this and are not partnered, we do hope you will remain with us, and we're glad that you've shown up. If you have been in an intimate relationship, you can imagine what it would have been like for you and your partner. And I'm also feeling quite sensitive to those of you who are mourning the loss of a partner. You may have been keenly missing them during this pandemic and would gladly endure any amount of relational stress to just have them back again. So I'm with you, my heart's with you. And of course, those of you who aren't partnered, you do live around partnered relationships. You have friends, neighbors, relatives, adult children, and no doubt you can tell which couples have been under enormous strain and struggling and which have done well. They don't even have to say anything. Most of you can read between the lines and are more intuitive than you probably give yourselves credit for. Now, some of you listening have a very healthy, thriving, intimate, coupled relationship. And this sequestered time has been easier, perhaps, than you thought. But if you said there's been no stress between you, I might question the truth in that. What I'd like to do is share a little bit about how Tom and I personally have navigated our relationship during this time. I'm going to highlight a few choices and experiences we have had, and hoping that that could be useful to you and to others. Then Tom is going to make a few important points that we think can help couples going forward as we all emerge from this time of sequestering, and for the future, should we need to shelter in place again in the autumn or winter, as some experts have predicted may very well happen. So a little bit of our story. I think Tom and I have emerged very well in our assessment, but we have certainly had stressful moments between us. And in general, we have felt the distress and uncertainty of what's been happening worldwide and within this country. We also have not had the kinds of stressors that some couples have had to face during this time, and we do live with gratitude for our external resources, such as our home and income, food, health, family, definitely this faith community, and books to read, and we have in-house entertainment. So we're grateful for that. I'd like to think that our inner resources have also helped. We do like to practice what we preach to our clients. We try to use our clinical skills to help us communicate effectively, listen, empathize, regulate our emotions, and manage conflict productively, not destructively. I think Tom and I have worked very hard at all of this over our decades together. We are life partners, and we are friends, and we love each other, and we also like each other, which I think is really helpful and has really been helpful during this pandemic. So at the outset, we did a few things that helped us. During the first week of the guidelines to stay home, we took the time and we sat down together and we talked. And we discussed how we were feeling, especially, and kept that up over the weeks. In fact, at the beginning, we deliberately made a covenant, and we called it that. We said we were going to commit to checking in regularly with each other and be vulnerable. We were going to share our thoughts and our feelings and not hold back. We'd sit down, we'd take the time to listen fully, not do like an on-the-fly conversation, but be very deliberate about our talking. We also named some important differences between us that we thought could affect how we would manage this sheltering in place. For instance, I have a higher need for social affiliation than Tom does. So not being with friends, our children and grandchildren, our clients face-to-face, the activities we're involved in might prove to be harder for me to be without than it would be for him. So I knew that I would probably be more needy of his time than he would be of mine. So we discussed this, and we discussed how to balance his need for alone time and my need for connection. Then at the beginning, there was big stress around our work. How were we going to meet with our clients? Could we have meaningful sessions by phone, FaceTime, or Zoom? We were really wired about this topic until we could sit down again and listen and figure out how to adjust, how to adapt, and go on in this new normal. We also had to discuss specifically how to manage the days when we weren't seeing clients. Our rhythms and approach to household chores, yard work, all that stuff are typically in sync with one another anyway on normal times. And I knew that would kind of ground us, but somehow it all felt more stressful in light of the pandemic. Ordinary stuff did provide routine for us, but it didn't seem quite as ordinary and stabilizing anymore. I particularly felt a bit discombobulated near the beginning and at different times after that. And then there would be weeks I knew of being only with each other without the chance to be with family, to, have a change of pace while going out for dinner or other activities, being with friends. So we knew we would need to keep talking about the changes and how we each felt over the long haul, because we knew this was going to be a marathon and not a sprint. In spite of the stressors, we also noticed a kind of coziness was settling upon us as well, and I was grateful for that. We breathed into the changes, and we liked our time alone, kind of like elements of a couple's retreat time. But, lo and behold, however, not too long into this, we had a particularly edgy day, and we found ourselves snapping at each other for dumb things. So you see, we were up and down, and this is what I've heard from many couples. There's an up and down kind of experience over these weeks. I recall Tom noticing what was happening between us and suggesting this thing was going to be long, not the 2 weeks or so of quarantine that was first issued by government officials. Tom suggested we be more mindful of our reactions, be kind to one another, talk about things that were bothering us, and not take our stress out on each other. That was also helpful, and we let up on one another is really what happened. But we had to be intentional about it. One couple, friends of ours who've been married, I think about 55 years, said wisely to us that it has been what they have not said to one another that has been helpful. They said after all their years together, they know all the things their partner does that drive them absolutely crazy, all the personality flaws and idiosyncrasies. So they decided they would just try to be grateful for what they appreciated in each other and shut up about the rest. In other words, practice restraint. I thought that was sage advice. So then over the weeks, Tom and I have loved and appreciated each other in deeper ways. We've actually created a few new rituals and practices that we hope to maintain. We have been verbally very grateful for so much in our lives. And yet, we still have had days where our stress has snuck up on us. It's popped up suddenly, and we've become irritable, tired of all this, and we were not our best selves. So we would have to heed the advice of our friends. We would have to practice restraint. Sometimes we would actually have to get away from each other for a while, and other times we needed to move closer and challenge the other to share what was going on inside. We also noted that some stress emerged after watching the news or hearing how our adult children might be struggling or how our clients were hurting. We tried to stay conscious and mindful to all that was impacting us. It's very difficult to turn towards each other regularly, though John Gottman, eminent relationship expert and researcher, says turning towards one another with a 5-to-1 ratio of positive affect to every negative is one of the keys to successful relationships. Building up that relationship savings account of positives can help couples when they've had a bad day or a bad period of time. Tom is going to share some general ideas that we think all couples can consider as they look back on what's been happening in these last couple of months. Like I said, I've called it kind of a relational inquiry. Couples can learn from it, and they can figure out how to move forward in a healthy way, or even a healthier way than they had been doing. And think about it. there are a myriad of very specific couples issues related to very specific relationship scenarios. Obviously, we cannot begin to address all of these directly in this presentation. But just imagine how different the stressors might be among the following couples during this pandemic, just to name a few possibilities. Imagine a couple who have both lost their jobs and seeking unemployment compensation. Imagine an elderly couple most at risk for the virus and living in a nursing home or assisted living. Imagine grandparents suddenly taking care of grandchildren so their child, who is an essential worker, can stay employed. Imagine couples who have been alone, who now have college-age kids or young adults boomeranged home. Imagine a couple with school-age children trying to work from home and at the same time homeschool their kids and then figure out what the heck they're going to do with them this summer. Imagine a couple who have just had their first baby, or maybe they've got a couple little ones, toddlers and an infant, and they can't go anywhere. There's no child care centers open. They lack the family support that they might normally have had. And what if they lost a job on top of that? Imagine couples who live in small city apartments and work from home, stuck together endless hours. Imagine couples who care for elderly or disabled family members without their normal supports. Imagine couples who live with intergenerational extended family members in tight quarters. And lastly, imagine couples who have already been struggling in their relationships, and their typical way of managing their lives is avoiding each other, bickering, both vying for control, aggressive behaviors, and they have to shelter in place every day. You can imagine what that might look like. And there's many, many more scenarios I could bring up, and you can imagine them yourselves. But like I said, we cannot address all of these specific relationship scenarios. Tom is going to share with us some different ways that couples might work together, and that would apply to most couples, because these things that I've just shared with you all have very different interventions because they're very different scenarios. So Tom.
Thank you. I think I'm unmuted. Thank you, Donna. As Donna is saying, certainly in this time of pandemic, there can be an enormous amount of stress upon intimate relationships, and that's understandable. Therefore, it's strategic and important that a couple be able to utilize the stress and crisis in order to deepen the relationship. Now, this is more than talk or woo-woo language. This really is possible. There are many crises in life ahead for a couple, perhaps not as monumental or serious as this one, but still there are going to be some very serious crises ahead. So we can learn from our dealing with this one in order to apply that for future crises and difficulties. I want to share, as Donna has alluded to, those who've informed our work on this subject are some of our mentors in marital therapy. John and Julie Gottman, David Snarsh, John Wellwood, and others, several others. The Gottmans direct a lab in the Northwest devoted to the issue of helping couples grow their relationship. David Snarsh in Colorado emphasizes strongly individuation in a marital relationship, while John Wellwood, whom we've lost last autumn, was a Buddhist marital therapist whom we found so very, very helpful in his books. So first tonight, I would like for us to look at the possible results of stress upon a relationship. One of these is that in such a stressful time, old wounds can be triggered, as Donna has alluded to. That is, that trauma or pain from the past can be catalyzed and brought into the present relationship. An example of this could be a person who was left or abandoned as a child, and that one could fear abandonment during very stressful times. That stuff can simply be triggered again. This could be unconscious or it could be quite conscious and produce strong feelings in the partner. That's just one small example of how someone can respond to great stress. Another way that couples can respond to these situations is to get stuck in conflict in the relationship. Anger is a very important emotion, and handled well, it can be such an intimate feeling and issue in a relationship. We often see anger as dangerous or destructive in a growing relationship because some people do that, but it need not be seen as such. Anger can be shared in very strong ways that are not destructive, that are not diminishing. It can be shared with respect, clarity, and even with courtesy. Anger shared need not be an emergency. It can be a crisis that needs sharing and hard work, but not in any way putting down the partner. Marital conflict does not have to involve yelling or diminishment of the other. In fact, that will just usually, almost always, just get in the way. Sometimes in a conflict, what is needed is to calm down. Sometimes to walk away for a short while or a longer while if needed. What's needed is to not talk over the other, to use I messages instead of you messages. Blame will actually get you nowhere in a conflict. And so we need to accept responsibility for our own feelings, for our own behavior, to learn how to negotiate, and of course, learn how to forgive the other, and to forgive yourself. John Gottman says, quote, "Happily married couples behave like good friends, and they handle their conflicts in gentle, positive ways." Donna and I have looked this up, and we found that every relationship expert that we have ever read emphasizes the need to calm down in a conflict. So in a conflict or in just everyday life, we can learn from another mentor of ours, David Snarsh, who talks about the 4 points of balance. Number 1 is to build a solid, flexible self. Sounds like an oxymoron, and it is. To build a solid yet a flexible self. And number 2, to develop a quiet mind and a calm heart. At its essence, that means to don't talk over the top of your head and get reactive, but to develop a quiet mind and a calm heart. And to learn, number 3, grounded responding. That is, you respond out of groundedness, and again, not out of reactivity. And lastly, number 4 is to develop meaningful endurance. And what David means by that is to learn how to take the hit in order to grow, to own up to your own stuff and what you've done, and to hear your partner when they challenge you. And so all of this brings me to the point of what a conflict really is. I think a conflict exists if there is a conflict of emotional needs. A conflict of emotional needs. That is, when the two partners have a conflict of legitimate emotional needs, such as the one Donna mentioned earlier. One needs solitude, the other needs affiliation or connection. This is a real conflict of what each needs emotion. No one's wrong here. A lot of seeming conflicts are actually just disagreements about who takes out the trash. These disagreements can be solved quite quickly. In this particular conflict, though, solitude versus connection, It may be that one will simply need to delay the meeting of one's needs and be there for the other. Sometimes I will delay my need for solitude in order to be with Donna. Otherwise, if it's simply a disagreement, work it out. It's not really a conflict. The Gottmans, after many years of research, have found that about 70% of marital problems cannot be solved. I want to repeat that. 70% of marital problems cannot be solved, only managed. Really? I believe that to be true, because many marital problems are actually one of the partner's issues that are impacting the relationship and cannot be solved relationally, just managed. It's an issue that one of the partners has that's affecting the relationship. And that takes us back to the issue we mentioned earlier. One of the partners has an unfinished issue that is unduly again, affecting the relationship. An example is, my mother died when I was 11. During college, when I started dating, if the girl seemed like she was moving to a more serious level of the relationship, then I reacted, often unconsciously, by moving on to another girl, Peggy Sue or Mary Lou. I did not want to be too close, for I might be left. Now, on the other hand, some folks will do just the opposite, and they'll gravitate to a very clinging relationship very soon. But this is just one of the many, many examples of the 70% of marital problems that are individual in origin. But not all issues raised or catalyzed in a couple's life in this pandemic have to be of earlier origin. Some are simply the response to the stress of being sheltered in place. Another key idea that the Gottmans have helped me with is the strategic notion that complaints can be done without criticism. To complain without criticism. The usual cycle is one criticizes, the other defends, and then counter-criticizes. Criticize, defend, counter-criticize. That cycle can be broken in three ways: to complain without criticizing, and that can be done. We all have legitimate complaints. And secondly, to look for the longing and yearning in each other's complaints. It's often there. And third, learn how to express and to accept appreciation and affirmation. In fact, the Gottmans' research indicates that in a growing relationship, as Donna mentioned earlier, there needs to be a 5-to-1 ratio of compliments to complaints. Now, some of my training in psychotherapy utilized very helpfully the clinical approach of the case study, a clinical case. So what I want to offer now is not a clinical case per se, but is a situation in which there are not a lot of old, cobwebby, unresolved issues in a couple's relationship. Consider, for example, that both work in high-stress jobs, and now they're working at home with the pandemic. They have 2 children, but no child care. One child might be a preschooler about 4 and the other is 8 years old. And somebody has to go out for food in a scary, dangerous world now. And they've got to provide variety in their children's life, to go for walks, to read books, to be with them. They got to do hard work at home, but now they also have to teach school. So the dining room table is now a desk, and the bedroom is a makeshift office. This huge increase in tension inside each of those persons, and then sometimes between them, seems perfectly understandable to me. The issue becomes, how are they going to handle the stress on the marriage? I offer some promising possibilities, I hope. First, it's not woo-woo to say they could see this pandemic as an invitation to conversation and to vulnerability. They could view this sheltered time and space, as someone called it, the great pause. They could talk now like they haven't talked in a long, long time. They could become deeply vulnerable with each other, talking about their fear around the pandemic, talking about their anger at all of this, and of course their fatigue. And they'll also need to find individual time and space apart from the other. They could also mourn together about the great losses that we're experiencing, the loss of life, the loss of jobs, the disruption that this world is experiencing that calls us to grieve and to mourn. They could also talk about their future. Do they really want to continue in such stressful jobs? Is this what they went to college for, to work this hard in this way? Are they following their passion and vocation? Are they following their calling, the calling of their souls? Or on the other hand, they could talk about how much they're really loving and enjoying their chosen careers, how they would love to resume their careers back in place at their companies. They could talk about their dreams for the future and how they want to guarantee their children's future and safety. They could talk vulnerably about their past and their joys and sorrows from back there. They could talk about any issues from the past that still occupy much space in their inner lives. So a growing relationship can use crises to grow if they're each willing to be vulnerable and honest and respectful and fierce and passionate. So I'll sum up. Stress such as this crisis can indeed be utilized to continue to deepen a relationship. Secondly, sometimes stress will trigger old issues that need to be dealt with, but that's also an opportunity. Anger and conflict of emotional needs, legitimate needs, can be a useful reality in such a deepening and growing relationship and can be expressed in passionate yet respectful ways. Some seemingly marital issues are not marital issues. They're old individual issues that need attention and care. Some couples, even in very stressful situations, can continue to grow with great effort, with a lot of patience, with a hard work, some vulnerability, a lot of talk, even a lot of fun, a lot of play, and cooperation. We believe it takes a lot of courage to enter an intimate relationship, to stay in it. It takes a lot of courage to work and to deepen an intimate relationship. So tonight, Donna and I affirm all of those who've had this courage. We hope you will continue on the journey of growth and deepening. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna and Tom. It's a wonderful presentation as always. At this time, if anyone has any questions or would like to make any comments, feel free to raise your hand, or you can text me using my cell phone or using the chat feature below. Donna or Tom, do you have any questions? Oh, Ted has a question. Right.
It has one. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I had wondered if anybody has done any relational inquiry. You know, did you find yourself like looking back over these last weeks and, you know, kind of like we did, assess how you're doing, how it's been for you, whether you've changed, discovered something new, or has it been flat for you? I'm curious about that. Has anybody done anything like that? And or just make some general comments about what this kicked up for you.
In the beginning, we struggled because of all the anxieties that we were both feeling. And
Yes.
We had to talk through our anxieties, acknowledge them, and come to an agreement about how we were going to proceed going out to stores or whatever, and the safety issues. And once we kind of came to an agreement about what we were going to do and got it all out, we really have enjoyed a lot of this time. We've wanted to do more walking, and we've been walking about 6 miles a day.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Feels tremendous,
great.
and getting a
So
lot of
Dolores,
house.
yeah.
That's wonderful.
I think it sounds to me like, the key was that you were both able to do just what Tom was talking about. You guys sat down together and were vulnerable and shared all your feelings. Then you were able to get to the planning stages. And then when you did that, you were able to get to the enjoyment and, find some of this refreshing. So thank you for that. That's good to hear.
It's helpful for me to know where
I knew they were good because they passed me on the road the other day while I was taking a walk, and they both had big smiles and gave me like kisses, and I knew they were doing well.
Yeah. And you were doing well. You were really going fast.
Thank you. Any others?
Ted, I think, was going to make a comment. Ted Olson?
Okay.
I really appreciated the presentation. It was really thorough, and thanks for bringing up one of my favorites, John Gottman. I think he's just a leader in this field. But I was thinking, just the being quarantined together, and we've been so used to, and in working with couples, what I've experienced is, and discouraged was this idea of discussing something via text. This kind of thing where they're texting with each other. And I said, you really don't get the whole face thing. And there's a whole as we know, a whole neurological kind of thing that happens when we're face to face with somebody. And we don't quite get that in the texting. But I was thinking, it's funny, in the early days, Christians were thrown to the lions, and now the real martyrs are spouses thrown to each other in a quarantined house. But the whole thing about being able to communicate without telegram, like we've done through texting or emails and things, and actually having that visual component, which is so important, I think, in helping to mutually regulate each other when we are in a stressful situation.
Right. Just before we started tonight, I was looking through a professional magazine, and a therapist was writing an article, happened to be, on couples during the quarantine. I was like, shoot, should have read this, a few weeks ago while we were planning this. But anyway, she said, she said couples that she found, she found were having trouble communicating verbally. She actually suggested to them that even if they're sitting in the same room with each other, just email each other sometime, or text message, because it would at least get something started between them if they were feeling, too inhibited to talk verbally together over a particular issue. So I thought it had its place, but I agree with you, Ted. There's nothing like face to face and verbal.
Well, yeah, and I would just add that, I think that's an interesting idea. But again, the texting that's usually done, before all of this, one was at work, the other was at home, one was somewhere else. And of course, this reaction type of thing, dynamic that would go on with the texting was destructive. But I think this idea is kind of an icebreaker, is sort of like, well, text your idea, your thought, and then let's go from there. That's an interesting idea.
It is. How about others? How have you been doing? And I really hope that those of you who are not partnered right now will, share with us what you've observed about other couples.
I was just going to say, I've been very much aware of people's differing styles. For me, in the middle of all of this, I need to have some downtime, some time to get away from it. But I know other people find it more helpful to talk about it a lot until they find that it's settled. And I had to realize that I needed to make sure that I was taking care of myself and providing time for me to be down in order to be able to
Right.
process when other people need to process.
Right.
It's not that one's right or wrong. It's just a different in personality style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That I've noticed that too. I had to turn my phone and email and everything off for about a day and a half, about 3 weeks ago. And I just said to Tom, I can't look at another FaceTime, Zoom, email, phone call. I can't do it. I'm turning it all off. And it really refreshed me. I felt a little funny about it first, and I missed an important email, but I was like, oh, well. How about others? Karen?
I was to follow up on what Bob and Dolores were talking about. I think, like them, we had those first days of, oh my gosh, and then moving into a bit of a rhythm that, and hearing what the two of you say, you found some things that you think you'll continue to do, some, you know, some new processes and rituals. But I had, both Jim and I are pretty introverted, so not having a lot of people around was okay, but he's even more so than I am. And over the course of time he was in the Coast Guard, he was on isolated duty 4 times. And so when I would start trying to think about, okay, what does one do? He had great wisdom to share, and, you know, and I learned even more things about what he had done, but I'd heard him talk about how he would keep busy and how he would do that. So he was, has been such a good friend, but also a really good resource through this. And he knows, kind of like with you and Tom, he knows when I'm getting crazy even before I do. So, and I've learned to listen to when he says I am.
I think that's so neat that you ended up learning something new from him during this time. You know, you two have been together a long time and you went back in some history. I love that. Thank you.
Neat.
Anybody else? What have you noticed about your neighbors or your friends or your family or yourselves that you're willing to share with us?
Or any questions of Donna and Tom? Oh, Denise. Denise, you have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. I can't do it for you. There you go.
Okay. I guess with us, like Donna had said at the beginning, that we're fortunate that we haven't had job loss or anything. Once you're retired, you know, we haven't had loss of income or don't have kids at home or anything like that we have to worry about. So we don't have all the work stresses and all that you would normally have, you know, before retirement. So we're fortunate that way. Jack has said a couple times, I think, that he thinks this time has made us closer. I think maybe it has too. We haven't, I don't know if we fought any more or less than before or not. But, I think one thing that we've sort of now gotten into the rhythm as far as shopping and stuff. We only go to the grocery store like every couple of weeks and go to the drugstore every week and that sort of thing. And we're both immune compromised, so that's kind of a problem. So we're a little more concerned about things than some of our friends who don't seem to be worried about, you know, they don't seem to get the idea that wearing a mask is good for the other person, not necessarily just, you know, for yourself. And so, you know, we're not quite as easygoing when it comes to being around people that aren't, you know, wearing masks and that kind of thing. But I don't know, I guess we haven't, but anyway, for us, we've done okay. I think we're sort of, I guess, in sort of a rhythm now with it. And in some ways it's been good and other ways not so nice. I mean, I miss seeing just people just at, you know, like being able to run to the store anytime you want to, or, you know, wandering around Home Depot looking for something, just seeing other people that you don't even know, but just that they're around. And so, you know, kind of being isolated has been kind of hard, not getting together with your friends and all, but but for the most part, we've done okay and are so much more fortunate than so many people. We've got a grandson who's lost has been laid off from the railroad down in Georgia. And so I think, he's hurting a bit there. And, but for the most part, most of our family has done okay. Their jobs have been ongoing, or they're getting paid anyway. Like the teachers, the girls that are teachers are doing fine because of course they're teaching from home, their own kids plus the kids in their classroom.
Yeah.
So, but they seem to be handling it okay. So all in all, we're doing okay. But we appreciate all the advice you have for us because you give us food to think to chew on, I guess.
But that makes me think of, I'd love to know what have you really missed most during this time? I miss eating out. I miss going to church. I'm a solitude person, but I've really grown to miss the connection with people at church, holding hands for the Lord's Prayer, eating out. I miss heirloom. God, I miss heirloom. What have you missed during this time?
I think eating out is probably the biggest thing because we'd either eat out when we just didn't feel like cooking or we'd eat out with friends. And I can't say I miss holding hands at church because I've always been sort of a germaphobe. So I don't mind. I've always figured there's always somebody sneezing and coughing and then you go to shake hands and that, I don't really like that part anyway, but I do miss seeing friends at church and just being there for the service, although we've been listening every Sunday on to the service that is here at St. Peter's. And we've also been listening to the one that is down in Georgia where in the wintertime, we're down there for a couple months and we go to a church down there. So we listen to that service too. So we're actually getting more church now than we were before, but we're enjoying it. So.
Dolores was going to share something.
I'm just
Catherine.
terribly missing hugging our family, our children, our grandchildren. I just hate to hug them. So that's been the hardest thing. And I'm a hugging kind of person. I love to hug people that I care about. And so being cut off from that contact is very hard for me. The Zooming helps. And talking almost nightly to our daughter helps. Zooming in with our son's family helps, but not the same as that body hug. Bob hugs.
I was going to say similarly, what I miss most is physical contact with people, not only with my family, but with friends, being able to hug, being able just to touch them as I walk by them. I've always known that I've done that a lot, but I've been very aware of how important it is to me. And while I've really appreciated Zoom, you don't get all the nuances of nonverbal communication or even the tonal variations. And there's a subtlety of connection that just doesn't get conveyed. So while I'm not complaining, I'm aware that I miss this a lot.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to be able to have that with my partner and think that I would be an unhappy camper if I didn't have any at all. But it's given me a new appreciation for that part of my life. And
Rogers?
I think Donna and Tom, you did a great job tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just the way in which you modeled the vulnerability by sharing who you are together with us, and how you integrated both the personal sharing with a larger frame of reference, so that it wasn't so much about you, but your being an example for us to look at. Great job. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate your words very much. Thank you.
I think Jean Rogers had her hand up.
I did.
Go, Jean.
Okay, first I wanted to thank Donna and Tom. I always enjoy listening to them. Tonight, it was especially interesting talking about relationships, and as most of you know, I've, not too long ago lost my wife of 50 plus years, and some other family deaths. So I've kind of been in this up and down Ferris wheel or roller coaster kind of life for all of those months. And so missing people has really hurt me in many ways. And last week, again, we had another family funeral, and I went up to upstate Pennsylvania for the funeral. And as we don't see all of the members of the family that often, unfortunately, it's usually weddings or funerals. And the fact that we couldn't hug left this gap. One of my cousins, who's actually a physician, came in, and as he came in the room, he put his arms out, and then his brother tapped him on the shoulder, and Scott said, "Oh my God, I just want to hug everybody, and I can't." And so it put a layer on the funeral that we all kind of left feeling that we didn't provide the husband and the children with as much support as we could have had we been able to, just touch them and hug them and hold them and, express condolences and the kinds of thing you do when you're in more of that intimate situation. So it's had a big impact on my life. I've never lived alone before, so that's a major adjustment for me. And so I spend a lot of time on the phone with the friends and family, so I have that level of connection. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think
Thank
Eleanor
you.
Boyce had her hand up. Eleanor, you need to unmute yourself. Thanks, Jeannie.
I was going to say,
Thanks.
as a single person, the thing I've missed the most are hugs and contact with people. But I have to tell you that I now have a new challenge in this era. I'm not really at health risk other than for age, but it's now become a challenge. I realize I don't like shopping. I don't like going to shops. So I love the fact that once a week I can set up I can set up 4 things. I can leave my house, go drive to 4 places, open up my trunk, have everything put in, come home, and I'm done. And I'm wondering how long I can keep this up, because I really like the fact that I'm not in the grocery store or I'm not in the drugstore. So I have this challenge. How long can I do this?
Keep us posted.
Your choice, right?
Yep.
I think Ted Olson was going to share a comment too. Oh, no. Oh, he's good. Anyone else? Anybody else want to join Eleanor in her challenge? All right. Well, we've come to the 8 o'clock hour. So Donna and Tom, is there any last thoughts you want to leave us with before we go, or?
You, Donna?
Well, I've just appreciated all of you being here and sharing. It just it just warms, it really does just warm my heart tonight. And to see how vulnerable you are with us and the different things that each of us seem to be learning through this, things we want to let go of, things we've appreciated more, and just navigating this whole time. And it just feels like a lot of love right here on this Zoom tonight. So that feels good. Thank you.
I would agree with that very much. Thank you, Donna.
Well, I thank you all for joining us, and I agree with Tom and Donna. They're always right. So what more can I say? But just know that whether you are by yourself right now or whether you are sheltering in place with your significant other or your family, that your parish family loves you and that we're here for you. And all of us are just a phone call away if you need us. So we'll look forward to seeing you back here next week. And I pray that you have a good and healthy and safe week. And just know we're here if you need us. God bless, and thank you, everyone. Good night.
God bless you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all.